Welcome back to part 3 of the key to a 400-pound bench press series. Like I've said, the key to a 400-pound bench press is the same key to a 500-pound bench press or a 200-pound bench press. In part 1, we went over the dreaded powerlifter's arch and how it's actually scientifically good to implement bits and pieces of the arch into your bench, even if you're a bodybuilder or just training for a sport. In part 2, we went over shoulder safety, how when most people think they're retracting their shoulders properly, they're not actually doing so. So we got into how to really do that and how to keep them tight underneath the weight. Now here in part 3, we're going to get into setting up on the bench, how to really set up and how to place our feet for a setup. If you like all this free information, please just smash the thumbs up button. It helps get this video circulating and shit so others may find it and blow up their bench. Enjoy. Timestamps are available in the info box below, as are these awesome shirts, both the 400 and the 300-pound bench club. Let's dive in. So, now that you've learned some basics, we have to take the elevator down from the top floor to the basement and start from the ground up at our feet, because the bench press begins at the feet. I know what you're thinking, that's insane. The bench press is an upper body movement. What do the feet have to do with it? Well, it's the same principle as boxing. When you throw a good punch in boxing, the power is not coming from your upper body. It's starting at your feet. You're driving your feet into the ground. That power is driving through your legs, into your hips, up through your upper body, and then into the punch. It's the same principle with the bench press. I do want to remind you guys that it takes no lower body drive to hit that thumbs up button. We're going to get into actual leg drive, actually pushing with the legs last, because it's the hardest thing to get down, and it's really the last thing you need to learn on the bench. But the first thing we're going to touch on is foot positioning. Your foot placement is your foundation. Even if you're not driving with the legs yet, you still want to have those feet cemented firmly into the ground. They should never just be resting lightly, chilling on the ground. They should be glued into the ground, trying to push into the ground, making a dent in that ground. And once you have that positioning, they should stay in place from beginning to the end of the bench set. Remember, your set begins before that bar leaves those pegs. If you have the bar in your hands over your body already, you're already midway into the set, even if the reps haven't begun yet. You need to get tight and you need to get your foundation locked in before you unrack that bar. And your feet need to stay there until the very end. Picture trying to move a house that is being built by the foundation. You try sliding the foundation over without the rest of the house coming toppling down on top of you. It wouldn't work out too well for you. So don't try to move your foundation when your house is already on top of you being built. It's not going to go well. There are two common types of foot positioning in the bench press. The first is referred to as on your toes or heels up. It's actually on the balls of your feet. We're not ballet point dancers, of course. The second type is called heels down or flat foot. This is when the entire foot from the heels to the toes and everything in between is flat on the ground. I do want to point out that certain federations may only allow one or the other. For example, the IPF and USAPL has a rule that your heels have to remain on the ground the entire time. If you're benching and those heels lift off the ground at all, the bench no longer counts. But for the rest of you, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just going to depend on your individual build and your style of benching. A typical argument you'll hear for the on the toes style is if you have shorter legs. And again, short legs doesn't mean short people. You can be tall and still just have shorter stubbier legs in comparison to your torso. That's how leverages actually work in lifting. I, for example, I'm only 5'8", not very tall, but I have long legs in comparison to my short, stubby little torso. If you're the opposite and you have short legs in proportion to your torso and you have a poor flexibility, so you have a hard time getting into an arch and keeping that arch, what people will find is that with this issue, they have a hard time reaching the ground with their heel once they're in a tight, retracted position. And again, we don't want to just lightly brush the ground with the heel. We want to be able to drive into that ground. If the ground was made of glass, could we crack it with the pressure we're putting into our feet? If you can't with your heel, your best bet is to go onto your toes. It's like adding a few extra inches of length onto your shin and giving you a better point of contact to drive into. If this works better for you, you'll probably find that you can also keep a tighter arch on the bench, staying on your toes than you can with a flat foot. If you try to go onto a flat foot, you might find that your feet tend to slide out from underneath you and slide forward, flattening your arch out completely, losing all of your tightness. On the flip side, if you have the build for it and you can reach the ground firmly with your heels, you may find that you can get a far better leg drive in this method. Again, it goes back to contact with the ground. When you can get that heel on the ground, that is the most direct point of contact you can give your legs to the ground. All that pressure is coming from your leg and going straight into the ground. There's no middleman. When you're on your toes, you're driving all that pressure from your leg down your shins, and then instead of going right into the ground, it kind of goes into this limbo area that is your foot. And instead of driving all that force into the ground directly, it slowly lowers your heel towards the ground. Your heel's kind of acting like a shock absorber here. Remember Newton's third law? Every action has an opposite and equal reaction. So if you push 100 pounds of force into a cement wall, that cement wall is going to push 100 pounds of force back into you. And whichever the lighter object is the one that's going to move. You're the lighter object in that situation, so you go soaring backwards. Now, if you have a wall that's made of flexible cloth and you try pushing into it, you're pushing 100 pounds of pressure into it. That cloth is giving to your pressure. It's moving with your pressure. It's not giving 100 pounds back to you. The wall is going to be what moves forward. Sort of the same principle here. You're driving all of that energy down into the heel, but the heel's not making contact with the floor. It has to then go through your entire foot and then go through the balls of your feet to get to the floor. And within that span, the heel is moving towards the floor, giving away a little bit, like the cloth wall gives away. It's absorbing some of that energy and therefore not allowing you to send the energy back up into your bench press. Now that can be good and bad. One nasty side effect of heels down is it can give you such good contact with the ground, you can drive too hard and accidentally shoot your ass off the bench easier. And that's what you see a lot of beginners do who are benching. They get a heavy weight, they start struggling, fight or flight kicks in. What do? They accidentally lift their butts off the bench to try and cheat it the rest of the way up. Well, that's one argument about on the toe benching, is that you can drive as much as you want to, your feet will absorb some of that extra energy for you, you can still drive enough to get tight in the lower body, but not so hard that you lift the butt off the bench. And that can be true. But again, on the flip side to that argument, people who have mastered leg drive and learned how to not push their butt off the bench and who feel better with heels down will argue that heels touching the ground allows them to drive better with the legs altogether, and they can't get any leg driver tightness on their toes. Again, it just comes down to which one works for you.
How wide you place your feet is also going to depend on you and your build. A good rule of thumb to keep in mind is no matter how you have them, the knee should be lower than the top of the hip. I've found on average toe benchers tend to like it better tucked underneath the bench, or at least right alongside of the bench, nice and close together. This sort of hugs the bench, allows better engagement of the glutes, especially when on your toes, when your balance and foundation is already a little bit more limited than if you were flat on your heels. If you bench on your heels, on average, I've found people like it a little bit wider. It doesn't mean it has to be that way. I do know some elite lifters who bench on their heels and still hug the bench underneath like this, but I found personally keeping them out wider gives you a little bit more of a foundation to base off of. Your legs are wide, you're balanced from side to side, and you can really drive. And again, you can feel the glute activation from this position with the heels. But like I said, there's no right or wrong. You can be on the heels and keep them tucked under the bench, or way out here in a split. Some people actually do lack the mobility to get their feet back behind them like this and need to keep their feet out forward. Again, as long as the knees are below the tops of those hips and those feet are planted and not moving anywhere, that's okay. Oh, I got a cramp. I'm dying. Now when I set up, even when I'm sitting on the bench, before I even lay down, I find my footing, then I lay down. But if you don't know where your footing is, here's a good way to find it. Now whether your toes up or heels down, inside or outside, that's something you're gonna have to play with and figure out. But as far as how far back to bring your foot, where your feet should be, the rule of thumb is you always want to put them underneath your butt. They should line up pretty well with your hips. Doesn't have to be perfect. Some people with insane flexibility will get them underneath their shoulders with the crazy arch. Some people will have to keep them further out by their knees. But you want to try to push for them to land in line with your butt. A good trick I like to do is this. Lay down exactly as you would if you're about to do a set, right? Take your feet and stretch them as far back as you can in whatever position you're planning to do. So lately I've been benching on my toes close to the bench, so I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to stick my feet back on the toes on the bench. Still loose right now. And what I'm going to do is, just using my legs, I'm going to try to slide my whole body up, slide my head up off the front of the bench. Just my legs, doing a leg extension. Feet are planted and go. Boom, I'm slid up here. I don't move my feet. Now what I do is I grab the bar. You're going to grab it wherever you grip it, which we'll get into in a second. Grab the bar, do a little pull up, swing yourself back down in front of the bar, then stick your traps onto the bar like we talked about in the last videos. and boom, put your hips down. That is where your feet should stay. Now, if you're just figuring out your footing, from there you might not have started off with them in a perfect position. I already know where my feet go. So from there, you can of course slide them out a little bit if you need to, if that's too tight and not comfortable, or if you need to bring them in closer or outer, that's fine. You're figuring this out as you go. But that should give you a rough idea of where to start. So again, we're pulling our feet behind us as close to underneath our butts as we can, and we're sliding our heads up on the bench. And we're just taking the bar and we're pulling our bodies back in front like this, sticking our traps down on the bench, and then lowering our hips. And that's about where our feet should be for a good solid bench setup. I'll show you again this time with a wide, flat-footed stance like I used to bench in. So again, I'm laying down bars right about eyebrow level. I'm just gonna take my feet, set it as far back as I can. I'm keeping them wide. I'm keeping them as wide as I want them when I bench, but I'm putting them back towards my butt. I'm then pushing my head forward again, grabbing the bar, swinging back, traps down on the bench, lower the hips, boom. They're planted and ready to go. This technique also paints a really beautiful picture of how to drive your feet into the ground. Watch this, if I do the same thing again, slide my body up, but this time I let my feet go numb, I let my legs relax, no tension at all, they're chilling. And then I go to continue to pull myself up by the bar. Whoa, only my upper body leaves the bench. What the hell is happening? Why aren't my hips going up in the air this time? It's because I'm not driving my feet into the ground and lifting them off. Now, if I drive into the ground and I drive tension into my hips, now suddenly my hips rise off the bench. Now I can steer my body in any direction because I'm driving into my feet and lifting my hips. And that is the sort of tension, that drive into your feet right there, that's the sort of tension you should keep the entire time you're benching. When you're here, and even when you're doing your reps, you should be driving into those feet at all times in this direction. You should be able at any point to grab the bar, pull yourself up, and have your entire body, hips and all, lift up with you. If you can't, if it's just your upper body, you're not driving into your feet, you're not planting them enough. And this is the principle behind leg drive, honestly, this is all it is. With leg drive, you're driving into the ground, yes, but if you drive just straight down into the ground, you're gonna lift your ass off the bench every single time. So it's a combination of down and forward, like a leg extension. But another good example is you're just trying to slide your body up the bench.
So to wrap this video up, let me just set up for you really fast. Now, I have been doing this long enough to where I can find my footing when I'm just sitting like this, like right here. That's where my feet are going. I already know that just sitting up. And you'll get there too with practice. So for me, you'll see me, I sit, I find my footing, and then I just scoot back under the bar. I don't do the whole swing thing anymore. I used to, but I just know where to set up. So now I know how to get tight and boom, I didn't have to do anything extra or fancy, and I'm good to go. There are still elite seasoned powerlifters better than me who still do the swing through method though. So it's not bad to keep using it even after you've learned your footing. But assuming we don't know where our footing is yet, feet are chilling. We lay down, eyes are lined up with the bar. I kick my feet back far enough towards my butt to get a good grip into the ground, enough to push my body forward. I then find my grip, grab the bar. Grip's not moving anymore. Once I have my grip, it's staying there, just like my feet. I hoist my whole body up, as well as my hips, then pin my traps down onto the bench and lower the hips. And from here, you can then go and exercise what we talked about in part 2, the last part of this series, where we lift our hips up towards the bar to unrack better, and then you can exercise working on your grip and form from here. And form is what is coming next. We're gonna work on some technique, some weak point training, moves to actually boost your bench now that you have your setup down.
Guys, this video is sponsored by Herbstrong, a brand of CBD I've been using for the last 2 years. I did a couple of videos going really in depth on anxiety a while back, and how I switched over from prescription drugs to CBD, and I've never looked back since. 2 years later, I'm still rocking with it. I felt it was appropriate to share with you in this video because it also works well for recovery from the gym. It's a strong natural antioxidant and a strong natural anti-inflammatory. No stress on the body or the liver, it's a beautiful thing, but it helps with all of that. So I take this post-workout and I take it before bed. Before bed ensures a better night's sleep, and after the gym, it's not only good physically with the anti-inflammation aspect, but it's also good just for calming me down, getting me in my zone so I can focus on work. After the gym, I'm usually all fired up. If you want to try this, I highly recommend it. You can start with 1,000 milligrams. Right now I'm using the 5,000 milligram dropper. I put the link for Herbstrong in the info box below for you guys. Next video coming soon. Thank you for the support.